Hello, ladies and gentlemen, dear teachers. Welcome to another episode of In Conversation with. I'm Rashmi Furtado from the TeacherTribe.world team, and today with us we have Mr. Vijai Krishna. He is a director of the Vidyaniketan Group of Institutions and alumnus of University of Western Australia, and he is an avid reader, loves his wildlife photography. But what I like about him the most is that he's one among those heads of institutions who, despite having a lot of work on his plate, takes his time, or rather takes time off to participate and engage in activities that are meant for teachers, that are meant to build a community of teachers. So thank you so much for being with us today, Mr. Vijay.
Thank you so much for having me, Rashmi.
All right. So today we will have a conversation on your journey of being a teacher and how you reached where you have today. So let's start. Let's dive into the interview straight away. So tell us about your journey as a teacher and head of an institution.
My basic training is in the software industry. I have worked as a software engineer both here in India and also in the UK. My foray into the educational space came about because the institution that I represent has been something that I've grown up with. It was started by my parents, and I have always seen the institution grow from strength to strength. And when I decided that I've had enough with the software industry, I felt it was time to go and pursue something in the field of education. And I chose to do my master's in educational management, and I went to the University of Western Australia. That was my first entry into studying education as a proper subject with the rigor and detail that is typically there in a Western university. And that is what got me started. And since I have always grown up with the educational institutions that we have, fitting back when I finished my course and came back was not very difficult. And the people in the institution have always seen me. I've always, visited the school off and on, and it was a pretty easy transition, I should say. And I was definitely under the tutelage and guidance of my mother. So that also helped in me learning the ropes. And the foray into the software industry, back into the school, it also brought in with it its own perspective on what I wanted in the educational space, and if I were to put my money and take the institution to greater heights, what is it that I must be focusing on? That is my entry into the educational space, and it's been long now. It's almost 21 years since I came into the school full time.
Wow. So that's quite a long time. And the way you explained it seems more like a natural progression that happened in your case, since you were already in that, in an environment that was into education for a long time. So I guess it was an easier progression for you, and something that you have seen from a very young age, and something that probably you looked forward to as you were growing up. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, I must tell you, he is our runner-up of the World Teachers Quiz that we recently had. And having said that, engagement for teachers. Not many schools have a lot of engagement for teachers. I'm not talking only about quizzing, any sort of activities for teachers. While many schools have one day, which is the Teachers' Day, and they have activities for them during that day. But what about the rest of the year? And do you really think, as an institution head, that it is required to have many such activities in between? If not every month, I understand it's very difficult for a school to find that kind of time. But even if it is like probably once in 3 months, if something can be done for the teachers, is that kind of reinforcement really important for teachers?
I'd like to analyze and answer your question in a couple of angles. The first thing is, you see, for a very long time, the profession of teachers has been, there is a lot of stereotype associated with how the profession should be. right? And often we forget that just like the students, the teachers also have their requirements, but that seems to have been recognized in certain other industries all the more. And I think it's time that we understand the role a teacher plays in every school and the kind of opportunities that you need to provide these teachers for them to not only be able to do their job well, but also for them to grow as an individual, have intellectual conversations, participate in collaborative learning, which is not necessarily only in the academic realm. So all these opportunities needs to be curated by the institutions that they work for. And if there are third party vendors and companies like yours, which is going to partake in these things, it's even better. Uh, what is fundamental is for the teacher to be able to do his or her job well, they need to have all these kinds of inputs, they need to have all these kinds of avenues for them to be creative, right? If you believe that teaching as a profession involves a lot of creativity, a lot of innovation, a lot of thinking on the fly, I think more and more such opportunities are definitely welcome. And we are really happy that an organization like yours has taken it up so seriously and have over many years conducted various such activities for teachers and schools.
All right. So what I've understood is for institution heads, I'm not talking about teachers here. I'm specifically talking about institution heads because that is the role that you are playing currently. So for institution heads, often we don't see them taking part in such activities at all. And I have seen two major reasons for that. One being you're always very busy and genuinely busy. We understand the amount of work that you all have. The second reason, which I think is a bigger problem. I would call it, I would request all the heads of institutions to not be offended by it, but I would call it the seniority syndrome. I do believe there is a certain amount of seniority syndrome that exists. How did you, I wouldn't say convince yourself, but how did you decide to take part in an activity like this?
I mean, if I have to answer this question in a lighter vein, I don't think myself to be that senior. So the seniority
Okay.
syndrome is thrown out of the door. See, at the end of the day, I think it boils down to individuals and the way they perceive what they do. Uh, I don't think it is a problem that is typical only of schools and the people who are heading schools. I think it is an attitude that the individual has towards newer opportunities, whether they are good at it, whether they are learning to be good at it, it doesn't matter. I think it has a lot to do with the attitude of the individual. And I have always enjoyed quizzing, although I have not, unlike the other contestants, I have not taken part in so many quizzes. But I've always enjoyed it. I mean, the odd trivia quiz is something that I've always enjoyed. And it also gave me an opportunity to kind of shake off my rustiness, like I was saying in the event yesterday. That it's with all the lockdown and the happenings around the lockdown. I thought this was a breath of fresh air. It made us think on our feet. Although I was not able to answer many of the questions, it definitely made me think on my feet. And I don't think it was that big a challenge for me to convince myself to partake and participate in the Global Teachers Quiz.
All right. So you mentioned about you being a quizzer or at least being a knowledge enthusiast. I think from whatever conversations and interactions I've had with you, I see you more as a knowledge enthusiast than as a quizzer. And I think if you like knowledge and if you like reading, there is a automatic liking that you will have towards quizzing as well. So having said that, and you reaching the runners-up position of the World Teachers Quiz, what I've also noticed is as a school, Vidyaniketan has a lot of such activities and has created many such platforms for your school children as well. And if I'm not wrong, your mother, who was the founding principal of the school, she started a quiz called the India Insight Quiz. So what I want to know is this a sort of a culture that you're trying to develop and encourage in your school?
See, I would not reduce it to one event. Of course, India Insight was a very popular event. It was an event meant exclusively for the middle school children. at a time when there weren't too many events for the middle school kids, right? But now that you ask me this question, I wouldn't say that it is only about a particular event, right? I think as a school, we have been quite open to the opportunities that we are able to provide our students. That is not limited only to events that are centering around knowledge. There is a lot of opportunity that needs to be given to students across all schools in areas of art, aesthetics, performing arts. There is a lot of opportunity which you can create as a school when you have such large numbers of students amidst your institutions. You are able to create such opportunities, and we have always believed that if a school is only focusing on the academic excellence and not looking at the education of students in a holistic manner. I know holistic is a very cliched word today, but it is necessary. I mean, when you look at the kind of expectations that nations have set for themselves in terms of what they want their young population to be prepared with, I think schools can no longer be oblivious to those expectations and the challenges. And as a school, we have been quite proactive, thanks to the visionary leadership of my mother, thanks to the ever supportive team and talented educators that we have with us. We have been able to do our bit.
Right. So, being an institution head, we understand that you all have a lot of challenges. And with the pandemic coming in, you had a whole new set of challenges that came up for you. Uh, I don't want to discuss the challenges here, but what I want to know is what keeps you going? Because it looks like the challenges keep increasing by the day. So, what keeps you going?
I think the single largest motivator, I'm not just speaking for myself or the school or the institution that I represent. I think the single largest motivator is the potential of every child. And when you deeply analyze the possibilities that such a potential has, you are duty bound, you are obliged, you have to do it. I mean, it is not an option. It is very important that not only you as a head of an institution, but you need to be able to take the team with you in them realizing the onerous responsibility that they have taken upon themselves. And I think when you put the child at the center of all the things that we do as an educational institution, I think the rest of it falls in place.
Lovely. So it's sort of technology has become a major part of education now, and as a school you all have been you all have heavily invested into technology even before the situation arose. So how do you see the future of education shaping up, and also if you could touch upon, do you see that teachers will now start being a little more open towards technology being introduced into education?
You see, although there has been a lot of negativity around the pandemic, people are undoubtedly suffering the ramifications of such a pandemic. It has also opened some avenues which was not so very available in the past. Now, now that you mention of technology, I think this has created a unique opportunity for the teachers to open up on the technology front. There has been a lot of unlearning and learning that has happened on the part of every teacher. And I think that is a good thing. I think now they have grown comfortable using the technology to deliver the pedagogy in the manner that they want. That apart, you are asking me a question on the future of education, right? I mean, common wisdom, the research always indicates that the educational space is preparing students for a future that we really do not know, right? We really cannot predict with alacrity what the future is going to hold and the way we need to progress to educate our students and make them ready for that future. That being said, I think technology is a huge asset when used properly to help children learn what they learn, to give them the kind of varied opportunities to learn based on their interests and passions, and more importantly, for technology to help every child learn at his or her own pace is something that can't be accomplished in the conventional model of a school. And that is where I think the synergy between the research and education and the technology that is appropriate to accomplish that kind of an outcome needs to be there. I think schools are increasingly waking up to these realities. And I think in more than many ways, the pandemic has accelerated that kind of thinking because the technologies are also suggesting what is possible with them. And that I think is very, very crucial. If you take, a couple of years ago, how many of us would even talk about breakout rooms? That's the simplest example that I can think of. Now, when you're looking at breakout rooms, you also realize that so much more is possible. How many of us, really experimented with the notion of blended learning? Of course, we knew what blended learning was. Of course, we knew the concept of flipped classrooms. But today, it has kind of come right in front of us that it is very difficult for us to ignore. And I think, even the schools that did not have the know how about these things are trying it out in their own way and making progress. Of course, it is a learning curve and there are bound to be, trials and errors, and that is fine. That is how learning happens.
Right. I would like to come back to your earlier point that you made. You spoke about Vidyaniketan focusing on a holistic development of a child. So I have done my homework, gone through your website, and what I saw was you're a school that doesn't necessarily only focus on academics or exam preparation. You focus on a lot of learning in when it comes to the child. I saw you have a lot of programs in music, in culture. You have something with Dr. L. Subramaniam. So, as a head of the institution, where do you see all of these falling in place in the context of the national education policy?
Right. You see, I think the national education policy has come around at the right time. Now, if you take the pre-national education policy, there were obviously good schools who believed that all these activities were necessary for their children, right? And you have enough and more examples of schools having embarked on activities that they believe are absolutely crucial for their students. And they believe that with that kind of an exposure, the students stood a better chance in comparison with certain other students. Now, what national education policy, in my view, has done is it has kind of brought all of these things within the ambit of what is necessary for the students of the future, right? Or what is necessary for the students in the future. So, either ways, I think, the progressive nature of the national education policy has opened up a lot of doors, and it has also brought in a certain degree of compulsion in the way the policy has been constructed, that no school can remain oblivious to what is stipulated in the policy. Therefore, the awareness that all of these things are necessary has also come to the schools, to the teachers, to the students as a policy document. And I think it's a fabulous improvement over its previous edition.
All right. So, coming back to your quizzing, since the basic conversation was to be around your experience in Know It All, the World Teachers Quiz. I'm very sure many of them would want to know how you prepared for the quiz. Although I know all through the quiz, I kept telling all of you to you just have fun with it and don't stress yourself out about the questions that are going to come up. So tell us how did you prepare? And two, how was your experience?
Very honestly, the notification about the Know It All came, and my wife, I must thank her for it, and she was pursuant and said that you must enlist into this quiz, and therefore I got into it. To be very honest, at least in the initial rounds, I don't think I did any preparation per se. I'm not trying to be, project myself as coming into a quizzing competition without any preparation. But honestly, I did not prepare for it because I did not know what to expect. But after the initial preliminary rounds, when it came to the time of the quarterfinals, even at that point, I was pretty clueless because the kind of questions that you guys throw at us comes from varied corners. And I don't think anybody can genuinely prepare for an event like this. So the task was given to my children. I have two lovely boys, and they were quizzing me on and off on varied topics. And they realized that their dad was just not cutting ice, and therefore they also realized that they may have to switch gears. And all in all, I would say more than the preparation, it gave a lot of opportunity to bond and participate in these family trivia quiz contests. Uh, and I believe that in some way set the pace for the quiz that for the various other rounds that came further.
Has this quiz and your participation in this quiz changed the dynamics between you and your teachers or you and your students?
I don't know why that should happen. I mean, uh, I have never looked at it like that, and I don't think the outcome of one particular event is going to alter the dynamics. Uh, because I believe the dynamics is not formed by the outcome of an event. It is formed by the individual. It is formed by what you hold dear and the way you project yourself and take the people along. So I don't see any reason why the outcome of this event, even if I had just gone out in the first round, I don't think the dynamics would have changed. Of course, it's brought in a lot of joy. People are happy for the fact that that I've kind of done okay, and that's about it. That's about it. I mean, I've really not looked at it in the manner that you have asked me.
All right. One last thing from you, a message for all our educators out there who are watching this interview.
See, I don't want to sound too preachy. There have been a lot of great educators. There continue to be a lot of great educators. There have been people with greater amount of experience, greater wisdom. So I am also one more person in the fray of things. I don't want to get preachy, but I will just speak what is common wisdom and what is absolutely necessary in the world that we inhabit today. On the one hand, we see that there is a great amount of opportunity, not only for the students, but even for ourselves. On the other hand, we see that all of what we are doing is also taking the world, humanity, into the darker days. When you look at the kind of climate change that is coming by, now you may wonder, why am I giving this kind of a doomsday message? But it's not a doomsday message. It's it is very important for us to be pragmatic, right? On the one hand, we want a growth that is perpetual. On the other hand, we realize that that can't be the case, right? So as educators, I don't think we have the luxury of being able to see the world in only one way and saying that we are preparing our children for an endless cycle of growth. We also have to educate ourselves first and educate our students that growth has its limitations, and these limitations are sometimes beyond our control. And I think the only way that we will be able to do it is when we start focusing on human values, and when we start focusing on ethics, when we start focusing on how we need to treat the planet that we inhabit. That's the only way education can really make a difference. And that is just my humble opinion.
All right. Thank you so much for being with us here today. I'm sure our viewers have loved this entire chat that we have had. Thank you so much, Mr. Vijay.
Thank you so much, Rashmi. Thank you for having me. It was really wonderful associating with your entire team through the whole event. And I really hope and pray that this event will grow from strength to strength. I think you have given yourself a very ambitious target of 100,000 teachers for the next edition. I wish you the very best, and I hope you will be able to scale much greater heights
Thank
with
you so
Teacher
much.
Tribe and with the other endeavors that you have on your cards. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, educators, my dear teachers, that was all for this episode of In Conversation With. And you stay tuned. We will come back with many more such episodes of In Conversation With. You take care.